the legacy of Fred Smith, the continuing debate on autonomous vehicles, and supply chains grapple with geopolitical uncertainty. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories, as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. How can you drive down your cost per unit and make every movement count? Read Zebra Robotics Automation's latest ebook, Unlocking Fulfillment Potential, to learn how their Zebra Symmetry fulfillment ecosystem was engineered to boost your profits. You'll discover a unique threefold strategy that enables workers to pick more items in less time with up to 30% fewer robots compared to legacy systems. Download it now at zebra.com/fulfillment. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, earlier this week, the supply chain industry lost an icon. Fred Smith was the founder of FedEx, a company that has literally revolutionized the delivery business. To discuss how Fred Smith's vision and business savvy left lasting impacts on the supply chain industry, we welcome today's guest. Mark Baxa is the president and CEO of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, better known as CSCMP. Welcome, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you with us on Logistics Matters.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's good to be here as well.
Fred Smith started with a concept he famously wrote as part of a college term paper that has revolutionized the world of delivery. What do you think will be his legacy?
Well, first and foremost, what he created is something that will live on in my mind, and that is the hub and spoke distribution system. Still used today by air cargo companies, passenger airlines, and many other forms of transportation, that has become a way to create a more efficient and effective environment for moving people and moving freight around the world. Simply genius. I don't have the specifics, but and it may be more of just maybe more conjecture, but I don't think he received the best grade on that paper, by the way. I wonder how that professor feels these days.
Yeah, I believe I heard a story that it was actually posted in the lobby or somewhere in prominent position in the FedEx offices. But no, I don't think he did get a great grade on it. I think it was a C or something, as I recall.
It might be a different grade today.
I think it certainly would be.
Yeah, certainly if all the logisticians around the world had a vote. So yeah, he is by far he's the pioneer of this and was recognized by the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals back in 1989 with our highest honor, the Distinguished Service Award. But more importantly, as technology became more accessible, he also created a way for people to not only track packages, but to do their own customer service online to get a package entered into their network. So just a lot of innovation.
You had mentioned the CSCMP connection with Fred Smith, and he's also a member of the CSCMP Hall of Fame. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we created the Hall of Fame a number of years ago to kind of differentiate real innovators and leaders in supply chain. And the Distinguished Service Award winners are automatically brought into that. And the path to earn either individually award is unique. But more importantly, we feel that the value that Distinguished Service Award winners bring to the profession is not just about their accomplishments, but how they changed the face of supply chain in a way that affected, in a most positive way, everybody else that's involved in supply chain. CSCMP is an organization brought into its purview something that we call the Hall of Fame, as you mentioned, Dave, that actually has a physical location at the University of Arkansas that is overseen by the staff there, namely Remco van Hoek. It's a beautiful place to go, by the way. And as a Distinguished Service Award winner, you're automatically incorporated into the CSCMP Hall of Fame.
In his lifetime, Fred Smith built a worldwide delivery company to rival UPS and DHL, but of course he did it in a much shorter time frame. Could something like that be done today to so drastically revolutionize how supply chains operate?
Well, the answer is yes. Every day, I believe we hear of prospects or actual reality of things being created and invented that improves our ability to deliver and move goods, create services, and move people around the world. We're continually improving. And as I think about today, where we are right now, technology is at the forefront. If I think in terms of artificial intelligence and it's leading now into machine learning as well as, incorporating that into automated services and systems like robotics and how this can play out, these are monumental and most significant changes that will bring further efficiencies and are actually accretive to what Fred Smith has created. So I would say beyond the boundaries of what's been created in the past, we'll create more in the future. And those that are the pioneers of artificial intelligence are now seeing the fruits of their creation or their recognition and efforts become something very, very, very real. And we're starting to see that in so many different ways in the supply chain. And, just take one specific area, and that is the move towards greater use of electricity in the supply chain than ever before. And although this is still an area of exploration in many regards, but also it's very, very real, where we're seeing innovations that create use of energy and also workforce that uses these energies, this energy system, to become more efficient and effective at what we do. So yes, there are plenty of opportunities on the road ahead to create something as monumental as what Fred Smith created.
Agreed. Fred Smith was known not only for his innovation, but also for his management skills. And he had something known as the Purple Promise to make every FedEx experience outstanding. He also preached the people, service, profit philosophy, which is a belief that by creating a positive working environment for employees, they will provide better service quality to customers, which can then lead to customers using FedEx products and services. Are these business philosophies that can be translated to other supply chain organizations besides FedEx?
Well, look at what he created. And I can't help but focus on the very, very element that he said first, and that's people. People first. Fred knew how to do that. And he created an environment where people not only understood the mission of FedEx, but lived the life of FedEx. Nobody can bring to fore something so creative in its time, and it's as true today, without engagement of people, understanding how they can make a real difference for themselves, for their families, and for the business that they're supporting. Look, the supply chain is about one thing. In the end, it's for the betterment of society, whether you're moving luxury goods or the very essentials of life, right? Things that are needed for the latest medical test that has a shelf life, or things that we need every day, the essentials of life, and everything in between. That's what the supply chain does. And Fred created a culture in his own company that made it abundantly clear where they play and how they add real value to that very concept, the benefit of what they do for society. And you might be hearing that as, okay, that sounds like a bit of a stretch, but in reality, absolutely not. Think about our everyday lives and what we look for, whether we're looking for it inside of our business ecosystem, a delivery of a critical part component or raw material or a finished good to distribute downstream, or we're needing something in our very own homes for our own benefits. The supply chain enables that to happen. And think about what Fred created, the hub and spoke concept, which allowed a massive amount of goods to move in a 24-hour sequence in large quantities with a high degree of accuracy, delivering on a promise. But it all began with his people. I've been inside some of their hubs and I see the automation, but I also see the people. And people make it happen. And Fred lived that. So, can companies do that today? Of course. And many companies are very successful at that, and they know what it's like to see that happen.
Mark, in looking at Fred Smith's legacy, what would the supply chain industry be like if it were not for Fred Smith and FedEx in our world?
Well, we might have been a little behind at developing the hub and spoke concept and getting that level of effectiveness placed in the supply chain. So, that's just for starters, because Fred had a vision. He made it happen and found a way to get something done that was just absolutely incredible. I think we would have eventually caught up, but with Fred's genius, he definitely propelled us much earlier on and created the ability for supply chain to do what it does so well. The ecosystem of supply chain is not about any one person and any one company. It's absolutely amazing how it happens and how it works when you consider all of the independent individual businesses and service providers that engage to make the supply chain happen, the universities that prepare talent, right, and the content and education that, well, organizations like CSCMP stand up to continue to improve people's development and their knowledge and competency to do things better, faster, and more effectively. I think leaders like Fred Smith helped propel us into where we are today and made a lot of that happen sooner and gave us a carbon copy, if you will, platform to emulate in other areas of our business. So together we're that much more efficient. We just maybe not have gotten there sooner than we had, right? So Fred just got us there quicker.
Well said. We've been talking to Mark Baxa. He's the president and CEO of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Thank you again, Mark, for being our guest today.
Well, pleasure to be here, Dave. Thank you so much.
Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, you wrote a story about the ongoing debate over the safety of autonomous cars and trucks. Can you share where that technology stands now?
Yeah, I'm glad to, Dave. This is something that just a couple years ago was theoretical and that was on the drawing board. But today, readers of the magazine might have seen autonomous cars or even autonomous trucks driving themselves around in certain parts of the country. Most of those models today still have a safety driver sitting in the driver's seat, but the intent in general is to make them fully self-driving at some point. However, what we're talking about today is that the regulations for that technology are all over the map right now, just in a literal sense, actually varying from state to state. So this week, we saw a rally by Teamsters Union members, and they were lobbying legislators here in Massachusetts, which is where I sit and Victoria sits as we record this podcast, asking them to pass a state law to require human drivers inside those vehicles. And that specifically was a reaction to plans by Waymo. That's the self-driving car company that's a unit of Google's parent company, Alphabet. And Waymo has said that it's going to start deploying cars in Massachusetts. Now, these are passenger cars, they're not freight trucks, but the Teamsters are involved because the technology involved is very similar, and so the laws would be similar too, regulating those. And of course, as well, a lot of last mile deliveries today happen with small cars and mid-sized trucks.
Now, Ben, I would assume that the Teamsters are involved because it's often union drivers who would be operating those cars, sitting behind the wheel. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly the situation here. So the Teamsters say that this technology would hurt workers by stealing jobs and replacing them with automation. But, they face kind of a tough fight if we had to measure it from where we're sitting. Waymo already operates its autonomous cars in places like Los Angeles, Phoenix, San Francisco, Atlanta, Austin, Texas, and they had previously announced plans to expand into Miami and Washington, D.C. Also, this week, actually, we saw the automaker Tesla. Last weekend, they debuted a fleet of what they call robotaxis, likewise in Austin, Texas. And that immediately raised concerns and a public debate about safety and performance and regulation. There was even some videos that showed those cars driving the wrong way down the street, for example. So there's some real safety concerns here. That application is for, in this case, passenger travel to compete with something like Uber or Lyft cars or taxi cabs. But again, as before, it's all related technology and related regulation. So this whole issue definitely has the Teamsters group's attention. And, by the way, that they're definitely not taking it sitting down. There's Teamsters-backed legislation that's pending in Oregon and in Texas. And the California Assembly had passed a bill this season that's still working its way through the process. It's not a law yet. And there are other related debates that are happening in Nevada and South Dakota. So as I said at the top, it's basically a patchwork quilt. It's kind of a mess out there for regulations, and it's tough to see how this industry will develop.
It is, and it is interesting because I guess it depends on whose data you want to believe. But I know Waymo, with the millions of miles that they have driven, actually report fewer accidents per mile driven than with human drivers through their autonomous vehicles. So, it's going to be an interesting thing, and I have a feeling that autonomous vehicles will continue to be hotly debated topic for quite some time.
There's no doubt, and you make a great point. Humans aren't perfect either, so we will have to see how things go.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And Victoria, you were in Salt Lake City this week covering and doing presentations at the SMC3 conference. And were a number of key topics surrounding supply chains and freight markets in particular that were discussed there. Can you share some of the highlights?
Yes, happy to. So, SMC3 Connections is a trucking and supply chain event that takes place each year. There were about 500 attendees at this week's conference. The focus is on the less than truckload or LTL business, but also more broadly on logistics and supply chain. And just before I dig into it, I wanted to weigh in on your conversation with Mark. So, attendees in Salt Lake really mourned the passing of Fred Smith as well, for all the reasons Mark just expressed. I had the opportunity to interview FedEx freight executive Mike Lyons for a leadership session during the conference, and he spoke about Fred's enduring influence on the organization. So the news really did permeate that event. Aside from that, as you say, the conference covered a range of issues, but two things really stood out to me, and they are things we've been focused on here at DCV as well, and they are tariffs and trade and AI. So there was a lot of talk about how the uncertainty, surrounding trade as well as larger geopolitical events will affect freight markets going forward. Also, how companies in the LTL space are really hyper-focused on applying artificial intelligence to workflows and business processes.
Victoria, you mentioned freight markets and the emphasis on those. What's the outlook for freight markets?
Well, as you know, demand has been softer following the freight market recession that lasted pretty much from 2022 to late 2024, depending on your view. There are some differences of opinion about the length of that period. But overall, the outlook now is pretty positive. Economists at the event predicted a relatively slow and shallow recovery for freight markets, and they also pointed to the better position the industry is in compared to the COVID years, when we saw some similar disruptive patterns and uncertainty. As we've talked about here many times, the COVID years really taught companies about the need to be flexible and resilient, and those lessons really seem to have stuck. There was a general sense that freight flows are starting to normalize and that shelves should be adequately stocked for peak season, as one example. So no one's predicting any major shortages or stockouts. So that's good news. This is, of course, barring any major surprises. And I wanted to talk briefly about AI because that was a huge factor, as I mentioned. There were so many examples of how companies are either experimenting with or using AI to streamline and improve their operations. Just to give you a couple of examples, some companies mentioned that they're applying AI tools that can filter through large volumes of email to prioritize tasks. So just think about after you've been out of the office for a day or so, or even a week on vacation, all that email. This is a good way to filter through that. Another company had said it applied AI to a route optimization project in its city-based transportation network, and that project led to about $13 million in savings. So the general sense among those who are either using AI or piloting projects is that it's a tool that has great potential to create more predictive and proactive supply chains. Many made the point that this will change the logistics workforce, but most agree that it will be for the better. The message was that this will certainly change jobs and roles, but that it will probably create more opportunities than it will eliminate. We'll have to wait and see, of course, but as of this past week, the logistics community seems pretty upbeat on the potential of AI.
Yeah, and I just think that it's going to continue to grow as we see some of these good use cases for how AI will impact supply chains positively.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Mark Baxa of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and or other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder, Logistics Matters is sponsored by Zebra Robotics Automation. Imagine how your operation could benefit from flexible, autonomous mobile robots that enable more efficient picking and a wider range of products, while handling up to 300% more cubic capacity. Zebra's cutting-edge Zebra Symmetry Fulfillment Solution is engineered to reduce your cost per unit and give you that unbeatable competitive edge. Don't settle for less. Maximize your profits with Zebra. Discover the future of fulfillment at zebra.com/fulfillment. We're going to be taking next week off for the long Independence Day weekend, so we will be with you again in 2 weeks for our next edition of Logistics Matters. Until then, have a great week and enjoy the holiday.